Hey there, friend! Welcome back to the Closing Chapters podcast, where every mission has a story. I played games with myself in my head. I had this whole idea that I had to start over from scratch. Why? In my head, we were not only in a different state, my husband had transferred to a different branch of the military, so I was like, this is all brand new. Nothing translates, nothing crosses over, all of my contacts are Air Force. It's not gonna work. I have to totally rebuild my business. Hello, my friends. We are moving right along into 2021, and it's gonna be a fast one. If you've been listening along, then you know I had one whole transaction in the year of 2021. What the heck, Brittany? What is going on? If you need some reassurance as a realtor that is moving your business, it is tough. It is really hard to pick up and move to a different state in particular, to go through the process of getting your license up and at it, whether you're able to transfer your education or you have to start from scratch. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. And oh, by the way, sometimes brokerages won't even consider bringing you on until you are physically there face to face looking at them saying, hey, I'm ready to put my license underneath of your brokerage. And that's what I experienced. It was like a come talk to me when you get here kind of situation. So we transitioned to Tennessee the week of Thanksgiving in 2020. And we purchased and closed on our house January 15th, 2021. So by the time we were closing on our house and getting settled, I was like, hey, I am ready. And I think I had my license up and going by the beginning of February at that time with Century 21 Platinum Properties in Clarksville. So here we go. And let me tell you, I played games with myself in my head. I had this whole idea that I had to start over from scratch. Why? In my head, we were not only in a different state, my husband had transferred to a different branch of the military, so I was like, this is all brand new. Nothing translates, nothing crosses over, all of my contacts are Air Force. It's not gonna work. I have to totally rebuild my business. Now, here's a few notations that I learned along the way. One is that, sure, we were at an Army base, but guess what? There were Air Force people there too. And sure, we used to be at an Air Force base, but oh, by the way, Shaw had the 3rd Army headquarters there and Fort Jackson 45 minutes down the road. So I was really in my head for no good reason. I had connection points and people around me that I just weren't tapping into because I thought it had to be all brand new. But let's talk about this transaction. This transaction closed May 5th of 2021, and it was a referral from another agent in California, and it was not a military-related transaction at all. This was a San Diego agent that I actually really enjoy a lot, and he reached out to me and said, hey, my parents are moving back to Tennessee. Mom grew up in this really small town, Paris, Tennessee, and they want to go back to where their roots are, and that's where they want to retire. How cool. And they were coming from Texas. They were living in Austin, and the area just grown so much, and they were ready for the country, simple life. So what a blessing it was that we got to work together and help them, and it was almost a built-in opportunity to have a little bit of family close by because they knew that I was connected to their son, and that built some trust. But then they were such an amazing family all the way around. And in the future, the son and the wife and his kids and then his sibling and kids came to visit Grandma and Grandpa. And they invited me over so that I got to hang out and see Brad in person too. And that was like super neat because a lot of times we only get to meet maybe at our conventions or different events along the way. So it was really cool to be like in a personal situation. And at the time, my daughter was little and I was very pregnant with my son because this was a little bit later on in about a year later after we had closed. So the grandbabies took my daughter, did all of the things with her, took her outside and played, did arts and crafts with her. They were amazing. And I just got to sit and chill and catch up. It was such a fun experience. But when we were looking for houses, it wasn't all sunshine and roses. One, in Tennessee, they have an amazing setup with their multiple listing system. They have one system that is relatively statewide outside of a few very small areas. And this area is one of those areas that tends to be in their own different MLS. So that proposed a little bit of challenges where I had to depend on other agents to communicate with me, help me get information and access to the properties, which usually is okay. But sometimes when you're in these small towns and they're like, if you don't have access to our stuff, then you don't need to look at our properties, or you don't need to do this, or you don't need to do that. Not the right mentality. We're all here to help sell a property. And if I've got a buyer, then you sure as bet that your seller is going to want them in your house. So anyhow, we had to get through a couple little hurdles like that. And one of them in particular, there was this house that my clients found out was a family property. Another family member had owned this property, and they were like, oh, how cool would that be for us to move back into a house that was a family home for my family? And it was on the market for a while, and we were trying to see it and having a hard time getting the agent to respond and get us in the door. And then all of a sudden it was under contract, and the agent was not super forthcoming. It was a little bit disappointing. However, we ended up finding another house on more property that already had a shop in place for great use and awnings on it, like carports on it. And they have a old Ford truck that is restored and beautiful. So it was great that they were going to have a spot for the truck. And it also was just a much better house. Not only was it newer, but it was a little bit more updated and just sound. So that ended up being really, really good. The hard part was trying to work with these sellers because they truly didn't have intentions of ever leaving this home. They thought this was their dream home and that they were going to stay there for forever. And of course, life circumstances happen and they moved. So we go into a house and there's a lot of things that we're like, we would change this, we would change that, but this is a beautiful start to a foundation. And then whenever it came time to close, and there was a moment that the sellers and the buyers passed each other, and the wife that was selling was so just adamant on telling the buyers every little bit about this house and what she did about it and why she loved it. And my buyers were so very kind to entertain these conversations and just listen. There's some bold colors in the house and things like that just weren't going to stay. So either way, it ended up being a great property. They bought it for $380,000, and it was 2 acres, a 3-bedroom, I guess you could consider a 4-bedroom, 3-bath. So there was a bonus room upstairs, and it had a full bath on it too. So that was really cool. There was a lot of good space, and they were going to be able to create this screened-in patio area. Actually, they turned it into more like a sunroom over the deck. So that was really cool. There was a lot going for it, and then they just gave it that extra step. And they also redid the kitchen, and the house was so much lighter, brighter, more modern. So it was really cool to see it a year later after they had loved it up a little bit. The house, once again, was in great condition. It just had some customizations that were very personal. So this is another example of how sometimes, just because of that, people don't want to depersonalize their home, or they've made very specific changes to a home. And most buyers find that daunting to come in and try to have to change things or have a big purchase like renovating a kitchen. And someone that is doubly retired and has security and can plan for that and knows that they're getting a great price on a house, especially when they just sold a house in Austin, Texas and made a great profit. This was a wonderful opportunity for them to get in and make this house home. Now, the really cool thing about this transaction is, yes, I got to go a year later and meet the son that was the referring agent, and we all got to hang out. But, oh, by the way, that didn't end like whenever we got to meet. So my client, she likes to come to Clarksville for the farmer's market. So if she ever came to the farmer's market in Clarksville, she would text me and see what I was doing so that we could connect and she could see the kids for a minute and stuff like that. So we would get to go out to lunch here or there and she would bring me goodies. She would make me pickles, which I love. I wish that I was still closer sometimes just to be able to call her and say, hey, can you teach me how to make pickles? I know I could Google it, but there's something about being with someone and them showing you step by step how they've done it. But anyhow, that was just really special. And then we had an opportunity not long before we were going to be leaving Tennessee to go back out to Paris because the unit that my husband was attached to, they were doing a water jump. So they had British paratroopers over stateside that were coming and jumping with our guys. And so their jump was going to be into the lake, which was really cool to get to watch. So we were out there all day at the park watching them load up in the helicopter, go through and do their loads of jumps. And it was really cool for the guys and gals that were jumping because they were getting British jump wings because they had a British jump master there with them. So all in all, a fun day. But it was a last minute like, hey, Miss Darlene, by the way, we're going to be out at the park here. Do you want to come see the kids? And yeah, she did. She took the opportunity, which was amazing. And she helped me push a stroller around with one kid while one kid needed to be held or vice versa. And it was just so nice to have that built-in support for the day, but also just to share our kiddos with somebody that was loving and appreciating it and has older grandbabies and doesn't get the little tiny love anymore. So all in all, I am just so blessed that we got to spend time with this family and make this connection and that I was trusted with this transaction, knowing that I had just moved to Tennessee and that I would just do the work because of my reputation. That is really, really telling whenever you have another agent that is willing to trust you, knowing you have not been in an area for a long time, and they just know that you're going to do the work. They know that you'll do the research. They know that you are confident in your job, and that trust it means the world to me. So this is something I would never take for granted. Now, the bulk of the rest of this year spent in trying to create a new community for me and my kids, not having kiddos buttoned up in school or preschool. Once again, finding out later on, we'd actually very recently after this found out that we had lost a baby, and so we had to transition and go through that. It wasn't a simple thing. I had to have a procedure and needed to recover, and so there was a lot of life going on during this time frame after already making 4 moves in a year and a half. So it took a little while for me to get back up on my feet, and I needed a little kick in the rump of, hey, Brittany, you are capable of doing this and you have done it before, you can do it again. And the other huge mistake that I made, this is by far a huge mistake that I made, and I have now created a whole training course around this because it took me so long to learn that I was doing the wrong thing. So I told you my mindset was, okay, we're in a different state, we're in a different branch of the military, I've got to start all over. So my idea of starting all over was that I went and printed a sheet of all of the U.S. Army bases, and I started finding agents at every single Army base, and I was trying to make connections. You would say, okay, yeah, that sounds like that would be pretty reasonable, Brittany. No, my friends, it's not. Because the reality is that I am not going to receive clients or have clients to send to every single Army base. I'm just not. If you know anything about the military, most bases are pretty centralized with specialties. Now, there's some that could possibly pass around to any and all bases, have pretty universal jobs, and there's going to be an opportunity for them at any installation. But for the most part, and this is the thing, is when you are attached to a military base, you start to get attached to certain jobs or MOSs, or you help one client, they refer another client, and you start to get a little nook of the base that's like your people. So when I was at Shaw Air Force Base with my husband, CE was my family. And then outside of CE, I had the drone unit that was like my secondary thing. Like I got to help so many of them when they were coming in and standing up the squadrons there. I learned a lot about their world, and I was very comfortable helping them and knowing exactly what their world entailed and how we could tailor their experience. So that's a really cool and important piece to your business. It's no different at this point. I needed to do the same thing. I needed to retailor my business and redefine what my new unit was, like what my new in was. Who am I specifically helping at this installation? And of course you're going to get a couple people that are in or out of that realm, but when you start to focus, then all of a sudden everything comes to fruition. And we know this by trade. We know that if we create a goal and we really focus on it and we actually identify who our client is, then all of a sudden everything starts to come. It just took me a minute to remember that. And the drone unit that I worked with is what triggered that, actually. I was talking to one of them. I had started to help some of them sell. So I was still working in South Carolina simultaneously, and we were starting to have conversations about them selling and going on to their next duty station. And they have a very tight rotation. There's only a handful of bases that they're going to. And that was my aha moment, that I was casting this huge wide net that was going to get me nowhere. So if you want to know more about that and how I learned how to redirect my thinking and how I needed to kind of like reverse engineer my business, then please go check me out on Elevate Freedom Training on Instagram. I also have a website too, and that's linked on the Instagram, and I share everything that I am willing to do. If I've done it, I've shared it, and I will tell you what worked and what didn't work and all the above. Now, a reminder that my world is very military faceted, so all of that content is very military oriented. However, this way to backtrack your business does not have to just apply to military clientele or military world like with realtors. So I've talked to a lot of other people that I'm like, hey, have you considered this? What is your thing? And how could we make this apply for you? But if you're in the military realm, then you absolutely should link up with me on this, because if it's not something you're already doing, you're missing a huge piece of lead generation in your world that could be helping you generate referrals in your business and having some consistency, which is amazing. And I'm here to tell you, over 80% of my business is all by referral. Over 95% of my business is all military. I just said the other day in an update to all my agent friends that I've had 15 transactions between pending and closing right now. And out of those 15 transactions, one is not military associated. So 14 to 1. I like those ratios, to be honest. I am happy to help and serve anybody, but military is my passion. That is what I'm comfortable with. That is where I know that I can excel and make sure that I'm taking care of my clients 110%. So I have learned that if I can hone into that superpower and really create this world that's going to support my business, then the sky's the limit. So I hope that that is intriguing to you. I hope that you connect with me on the EFT platform and continue to learn some of the ways that you can be sprucing up and reverse engineering your referral pipeline. You all have a wonderful day, and I will see you on the next one. Hey, I just wanted to say thank you for being here and listening in on this episode of Closing Chapters with me. I truly enjoy putting this content together, and I hope that you enjoy it too. If so, could you like, subscribe, and share this episode with somebody you know that will enjoy it just as much as you did? Thank you so much.